Today, we're jumping right into the Indian Copyright Act of 1957. Now, I know what you're thinking. Legal text sounds boring, but we're not going to do it that way. Instead, we're going to follow the journey of a creator, someone just like you, from that first spark of an idea all the way to protecting the final product. Let's dive in.
If you're a writer, a musician, a programmer, an artist, you've definitely asked yourself this. You pour hours, days, maybe even years into making something totally new. And then what? How do you make sure that work is actually legally yours? Well, that's exactly what we're here to figure out.
Okay, so first things first. Before we can even talk about protecting your work, we have to get our heads around the absolute basics. What does the law even consider a creative work that's worth protecting in the first place?
And you might be really surprised by just how broad the definition of a work is. We're not just talking about a painting hanging in a gallery or a novel on a bookshelf. The law is way bigger than that. A literary work, that actually includes things like computer programs and databases. So yeah, that slick piece of code you just wrote, that can be a work. That catchy jingle you can't get out of your head, that's a work too.
So if that's the work, then what in the world is copyright? It's not just some fancy certificate you hang on the wall. Think of it as a bundle of exclusive rights, a set of powers that only you, the creator, get to have. It's the right to reproduce your work, to publish it, to perform it, to adapt it. It's basically the law standing behind you saying, yep, this is yours, you decide what happens with it.
All right, so this brings us to a really crucial question, and honestly, it's one that trips up a lot of creators. Who is the actual owner of the copyright? The answer, well, it isn't always as simple as you might think.
The law starts with a really simple rule. The author, the person who created the thing, is the first owner. Makes sense, right? But here comes the huge exception, the one you really need to know about. It's called work for hire. If you create something as an employee, under a contract of service, then your employer is legally the first owner of the copyright, not you. So if you're a developer writing code for a tech company, that company owns the copyright, not you, unless your contract specifically says otherwise. That fine print really matters.
Okay, so you've created something, and you figured out who owns it. The next logical question is, how long does that ownership last? Does it go on forever?
For most creative works here in India, the magic number you need to remember is 60. The law is super clear on this. For literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works, your copyright lasts for your entire lifetime, plus an extra 60 years after you pass away.
But, and this is a big but, that 60-year clock doesn't always start at the same time. For a book or a painting, it kicks in after the creator's death. But for things like films and sound recordings, which are often made by companies, not individuals, that clock starts ticking from the year they're published. It's a really important distinction to keep in mind.
Of course, the point of creating something isn't just to lock it away in a vault. You want to share it, maybe sell it, or let other people use it. And the law gives you two main tools to do exactly that: licenses and assignments.
The easiest way to think about this is with a simple analogy. An assignment is like selling your house. You are permanently transferring ownership of your copyright to someone else. It's a done deal. A license, on the other hand, is like renting out a room in your house. You still own the whole thing, but you're giving someone permission to use a part of it for a specific purpose for a set amount of time.
Now, if you are going to assign your rights, listen up, because there are some non-negotiable rules. The agreement absolutely has to be in writing and signed. A verbal promise won't cut it. You have to clearly state which work it is, which rights are being transferred, for how long, and where in the world. And get this, if you forget to mention how long the assignment is for, the law just assumes it's for 5 years. And if you don't specify a territory, it's assumed to be just for India. These details are your legal safety net.
All right, we've reached the final leg of our creator's journey, protecting your work. What happens when someone uses your creation without asking? And are there ever times when it's actually okay for someone to use your work without your permission?
So, what is infringement? It's actually pretty simple. Remember that bundle of exclusive rights we talked about earlier? The right to reproduce, publish, perform, all that? Well, if someone does any of those things with your work without getting a license from you, that's infringement. Plain and simple.
But, and this is a really big but, the law has something called fair dealing. You can think of it as a kind of legal free pass in certain situations. It's basically the law saying it's not infringement if you use a copyrighted work for things like your own private research, for criticism or review, like a movie critic showing clips, or for reporting the news. This is super important because it makes sure copyright doesn't get in the way of education and public discussion.
Okay, let's make this real. Let's say you wrote and published a book. One day, you find out someone went to a shop and photocopied an entire chapter.
So what do you think? Is that person breaking the law? Is it infringement?
And the answer is, it all depends on the why. If a student photocopies that chapter to use in their personal study notes, that's covered by fair dealing, and it's perfectly fine. No infringement. But if that same person makes 100 copies of that chapter and starts selling them to other students to make a quick buck, now that is a clear violation of your exclusive right to reproduce your work. See? The action is the same, but the purpose changes everything.
And really, that's what this all boils down to. The whole point of copyright law isn't just to lock ideas away. It's about creating a balance. On one hand, it protects and rewards creators, so they have an incentive to keep making new things. But on the other hand, it makes sure the public can still access and use those works for important things like learning, commentary, and research. It's a balancing act. And that brings us to one last big question to leave you with. The law we've been talking about was written back in 1957. Of course, it's been updated, but its core ideas come from a very different time. So the huge question for all of us today is this: how do concepts like author and original work even apply in a world of AI-generated art and music? That's a debate that is going to define the future of what it even means to be a creator.